Hello, it's Thursday. So you've seen the title, you know what we're doing. I don't want you to worry too much about the dinosaur series, just here is some proof that we are definitely going to be proceeding with it. This little ankylosaurus will be next week. So I've been making a lot of these little fuzzy animals recently. So I've made a puppy and I've made a kitten already. So this is Sam and this is Ace. And for today, I thought it might be fun to do his fur in some rainbow colors. So these two are actually made using the exact same pattern. And I should warn you ahead of today that the actual crochet part of this doesn't look good. All right, so let's talk about tools and materials. So for the actual crochet portion of this project, you are going to need a base color, which won't really show through that much. And you're going to need some pink to do toe beans. These are both 8-ply, 100% acrylic, as are the colors that I'm going to be using to make the fur. You're going to need your 3.5mm hook, a pair of scissors, pins and needles, and a pair of 21mm safety eyes. Now, for my previous kitten, I have used 15mm safety eyes, and this is what the 21mm look like. So anywhere around that size range should work fine for this project. And I've used just some paint markers to fancify this particular pair of eyes up a little bit. If you want to watch me do that, I will link here to the video where I customized just a bunch of different eyes. And you'll also need some stuffing. So that's all you'll need for the crochet part of this project. Now, to add the fur, the luxurious fur that really does make this project what it is, you are going to need yarn in your selected colors. Now, because I've decided rainbow is the flavor of the day, I have 6 different colors out here. And you are going to need your slicker brush. Now, we've used these on the channel before. So what you're looking for in one of these brushes is you want the very sharp metal bristles. They are used for pet grooming. I picked this one up at my local supermarket. They're not expensive, but they are what gets you this beautiful fluffy technique. And we'll also just be using our hook as well when it comes to that. Now, I'm going to be filming this one a little bit differently just because the crochet itself isn't super complicated, but the fur takes a lot of time and will require a bit more instruction. So what we're going to do is we're going to whip up the base crochet pieces really quickly. Okay, you ready? Here we go. So to start with, we're going to make the head and body piece. Now, it is all just one main potato. And when we finish row 25, we do need to stop and insert our eyes. So the eyes do go into row 5, and how far apart you place them does dictate the expression. So these ones here were about 6 stitches apart, but for my rainbow kitty, I want them slightly closer together. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm then going to stuff that piece firmly, and then we continue on. We're going to make a little snout just to give a little bit more volume to that part of the face. So next up, I'm going to make a pair of cat ears, which are very quick and easy. Now, I have swapped to the ear color I'm going to be using for the fur as well, just because you can see the base ear through in the final piece. Next up, we're going to be making the front feet, and we do alternate between our base color and our pink in order to make sure that they have the little toe beans that we want. Now, your front feet are going to look strange at this point, and that's because we have to leave a lot of room for how thick the fluff gets around that part of the body. So next up, we're going to be making the back feet, which are basically the front feet, but as little paddles instead of with the weird little straws sticking out the top. And lastly, we're going to make a stubby little cat tail, and I am going to work mine up in my rainbow just to help guide me when I'm attaching the fur later. But there are all our pieces. At this point, you're probably wondering if this is some sort of joke I'm playing on you, but I promise it gets better from here. I am going to pin them all together just so that you get a feel for what it is we're making. So I've already positioned the snout and the ears, as you can see here, and I'm going to pin on the legs where they need to go. So you'll note that it has this very puffed out chest, and the front legs go on either side of that little chest bulge, like so. And then we've got these little paddles that are just our back feet, and they go on the base just behind where those front feet will sit. Honey, who's that Mario character? The pink egg sucker with the bow on her head. The little, not Kirby.
Birdo?
Birdo! I'm getting crazy Birdo vibes from her right now. So that's where the feet will all go, and then the tail with a little bit of a stuff and a little bit of a squish at the opening end. Tail will go here at the back. This rainbow is making me so happy. So that's where all of the pieces are going to go. And I bet at this point what you want to ask is, how does this turn into this? And that is the next thing that we're going to be looking at. So don't sew any of these pieces on yet, okay? So now that we've completed making all of the pieces, what we're going to be doing next is working on the fuzz. So the fuzz is made out of 2 to 3 inch long pieces of yarn that we use a lark's head knot to attach to the crochet, and then we use a wire brush to fuzz it out. Now, there is a bit of a technique that I've sort of worked out on how to do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is prep my yarn. So the fastest way I've found to create lots of pieces the same length rather than sitting there and snipping is, give me a second, is wrap the yarn around and around your fingers, just 2 of them, and then take your scissors and cut down between your fingers, like that. Being careful not to actually injure yourself, okay? It's just a recommendation. And just like that, I have a whole lot of red pieces that are the right length. So now I'm going to do this with each of my colors. All right, so I have just made a little bit of each of the colors just to get me started. I will be making more along the way. You will need more than this. So the best way I found to approach this is to do the individual pieces separate from the body, then attach them to the body and fill in the gaps around it. So I'm going to start with the tail because it's a good little practice piece and it's already stuffed. So we'll set the body aside. Now, because I've done my striping, I can see exactly where I want to put each of the colors. So for those of you who don't know what a lark's head knot is, okay, so what you do is you insert your hook through the stitch you want to attach the yarn to. You pull the center of your loose piece through, and then you pull the 2 ends through the loop made by their own center and pull it tight, just like that. So because I want the tail to be quite dense, I am going to be putting these through every single stitch, but when we head to the body, we might do it a little bit more spaced out. So basically, once you've attached as many pieces of yarn as you want for the density of fluffy that you want, we then take our wire brush and we brush them out. Now I'm going to be doing it 2 rows at a time just to make sure I can fluff everything properly. And I'm going to just go through and complete this tail now. Okay, so there is the finished tail. So you'll note that I worked from one end down in rows to the other, fluffing every second row or so. Now with all of the stuff that comes off, because you will get quite a lot of fiber accrue, normally I would separate this by color and put it to one side in the hopes that one day I will pick up needle felting. Oh, how satisfying is that? But because I'm using so many colors, I don't feel like sorting by color, so I'm just going to put this to one side in a plastic baggie and I'm going to use it for stuffing. And there is our fuzzy, fluffy tail. Now, we do use quite long pieces of yarn for this to make the knots a little easier, and then I will take my scissors and give each piece a haircut afterwards just to smooth off some of these little rough ends. But we're going to pop this to one side and I'm going to work my way around each of the feet. So how that works. So for the back feet, we're not going to do the sole of the foot at all. We're going to work around the edge and we're going to do 2 rows up all the way around the edge and just fluff that. And then for each of the front feet, I'm going to do the same 2 rows for each of the feet. And then I'm going to work up the outer edge of each of the legs. So on the left leg, I'll work up the left side, and on the right leg, I'll work up the right side, leaving the inner edge bare without any fuzziness on it so that we can attach to the body more easily. So we're going to do the legs and feet now. All right, so I've done the first 2 rows of each of the feet and I just wanted to stop and let you see what that actually looks like. So these crazy little spaghetti monsters are what turn into the feet. So I'm going to just brush out these 2 rows. So that's what it looks like, all fuzzy. And it's interesting because it's only 1 layer, so you can kind of see through it. Well, technically it's 2 rounds. But what I'm going to do at this point is I'm actually just going to give it a little bit of a haircut. So I'm going to just cut it in a circle around 1 centimeter long. You can do this over a baggie as well if you want to like reduce the mess and have it already pre-bagged. Okay, so even that's probably still a little bit long, but we're going to leave it at that level for now until we've attached it to the foot. So that's the treatment I'm going to give each of the feet that we've got here. And then I'm also going to do, as I spoke about before, the left side of one of these legs and then the right side of the other one so that they are fuzzy on the outside and not on the inside. So there are the front feet completely done. Now I'm doing mine in colourful stripes just to add to the rainbow. You can do yours all in one colour or you can give it different coloured socks. The last thing we're going to do is the ears before we start sort of really piecing this together. Now, the ears you don't actually want to be that fluffy because you do want to retain some of the shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brush on the ear itself directly. Mainly around that outer rim, not inside the middle bit. Just to work up a little bit of a fuzz, like so. Then I'm going to take just a couple of strands of this red, and we don't want to do every stitch, but I am going to do the very tips of the ears, and just one or two more pieces down the back, just to thicken up that fluff a little bit. These parts really do just sort of come down to personal preference, so add as much or as little fluff as you would like. Just like that. Now they look a little bit scruffy, but that's just kind of the aesthetic here. Okay, so having fluffed up all of these pieces and suited them up nicely, suitably, if you please. I'm running low on a couple of colours, but that's okay. The next thing we're going to work on is the face. So first things first, we are going to sew on our snout. So I'm just sewing 3/4 of the way around, and then I'm pausing and I'm stuffing it a little bit and I'm finishing it off. Okay, so the next thing we're going to work on is the face. Now pins are going to be your best friend for marking out where you want the different parts of the face to go. So first up, I'm going to mark where the nose is going to be. I'm not going to sew that on until we've done the rest of the face though, and by extension where the mouth will be as well. And we do this because the direction we attach the yarn around the face does really help to build the face. So you'll be able to see on both of these creations. We attach in an outwards direction from a central point around the nose and mouth shape, and that helps us really get that definition of a lip. And we've done the same thing here, even though his expression is strangely smug. So I've marked out where the nose and mouth are going to go, which will help me guide where I want the hair to sit. And then I'm going to just rough out where the rest of the color lines are going to be. So around the eyes, I'm going to do orange. And thankfully I have rainbow colored pins to help with this endeavor. So she's a fancy lady and she's going to have orange cheeks. And I'm going to bring the red down to the top of the nose. I'm going to do it as eyebrows as well. So it sits on the top of the head like a little hat. And then I am going to do yellow under the mouth and down. Okay, so I'm going to start with the mouth or the under jaw. So that means that I'm going to need some yellow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a row of stitches that's going to represent the lower lip. So for me, it's going to be this row here along the little snout. And I'm going to be very careful to only insert my hook in an upward direction along that lip. This whole row of fuzz will point downwards and leave a very clear lip. So that's the first strand, pulling it tightly and placing it downwards. And then I'm going to do that whole line of stitches, making sure the yarn is all pointing downwards. I'm going to do some in a diagonal as well, just to really flesh out that lip. So that row ended up lower than I thought it would. So I'm going to now continue up and do the next row up as well. So there is that done. And now I am just going to carry on the yellow down to the bottom of the snout, just to finish off this one little chunk. Just like that. Now I know this looks ridiculous now. Somehow it looks more ridiculous than when we started, but it does improve from here. So what we're going to do now is working the sides of the snout and down and around and under the eyes where I've kind of marked with the pins. I'm going to block in my orange. So for the orange, we're going to make sure that we're working in a horizontal direction so that when we fluff it out, we can smooth it up and around the eye in a smooth way. Now, you don't need to worry too much about putting a strand in every single stitch. You can do every second row, you can do every second stitch, and I found that that gives you a pretty good fluff density. It's just for the face that I'm being a little bit of extra careful because it does tend to be where the focus sits. Okay, so having done the snout, I'm now going to work in a fan around this eye. So the direction that we're going to use is going to be moving around the rim of the eye. Don't be afraid to like tuck your hook under there either. So like that one there, just moving that eye slightly out of the way in order to get the fur as close to that eye as possible. So I've done one of the cheeks, and at this point I am going to fuzz that cheek and just make sure that I'm happy with how dense the fluff is, or if I need to add some more in. And when I brush, I'm being very careful to make sure that I work through all the layers, because normally I would do 2 rows and then fluff it, whereas like I've done a bit more thickness here. Okay, that is flippin' majestic, that is. I've missed a few spots in here though, so I'm just going to sort of fold them to one side and get in there. Now I can see a lot of my base color coming through here, so what I'm going to do is work back through those stitches, again as close to under the eye as possible, and we're going to insert a few more strands in there. And just like that, we filled in that little bit of extra gap. Now I'm going to do the same thing in the orange on the other side. I'm going to fluff the chin while I'm at it. Okay, so that majestic beard is what our kitten looks like at the moment. So this little line here will become the mouth, and then we'll put the little nose in there. All right, so next up we're going to pin and sew our ears in place just behind the eyes like that. And then we're going to fill in the space from the tip of the nose back to level with the ears with rows of our head color. And see, as promised, it stops looking quite so weird and starts looking really, really cute. So I've filled in the red to the back line. I've fluffed it all up, and now you can see why we were so careful with the directionality of the fur. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to use a little bit of pink, and we're going to stitch on a little nose in the middle there. I'm going to grab some black, and I'm also going to stitch in just a little top lip just to hide the ends of those tufts. So that's what we're going to work on now. We're going to sew those in, and then we're going to give him a little bit of a haircut. I'm potentially going to trim that hair a little shorter, but for now I'm going to leave it pretty long. You can always just cut off a little bit at a time, similar to when you're trying to do a home haircut. A little bit at a time, because you can always cut more off, but you can't glue it back on. So the next step is actually that we're going to sew all of our pieces on. Now the reason that we do it now is because we're about to have to fill this whole body up with fur, and anywhere we sew a piece on, we don't have to fill. It's already filled by the piece, which is great, perfect. I'm just gonna shuffle my color guides around to the back where they won't be in the way. And we're going to start by pinning on our front legs, which look like fluffy can-can dancer pants. Flamenco pants, that's the words I'm after. This little guy is unbelievably soft and fuzzy already. So those front legs go back on the front where we had them before, making sure that our toe beans are oriented correctly. Our back feet, once again, go back underneath, and you'll note that between these 4 feet, the whole belly is covered. So we still need to fill out the chest, but the whole belly gets covered. Now, before we sew these on, you might find it easier to fill that chest in before you sew these on. I'm going to sew them in at the shoulders, then bend them out of the way and work down to about here. But you can kind of approach this however is easiest for you. You may notice that this pattern is a little bit more of a guide than a strict pattern, just because so much of it relies on your own creativity, your own input, your own judgment. I can't tell you exactly where to attach each piece of fur. I can just show you roughly what it's going to look like. Roughly what it's going to look like if you do. And then finally, this rainbow tail is just making my life. We're going to just take that and attach it at the back. And I just can't, you guys. I just look at it. I mean, we're going to trim it down a little bit so it's a little less ridiculous. But look at the little face. Okay, we are back. I have calmed myself. And then the tail just goes on the back like that. Now you can stitch it in an upright position, which does cover more of the butt, or you can have it down. On Ace, I did a little down tuft, and this is kind of how short I cut the tail on this guy. This guy might end up with a fuzzier one. Just because look at it. Sorry. So yeah, I'm going to just sew all of these pieces on, and then I'm going to work a couple of rows at a time and then fuzz, and then a couple more rows and then fuzz until I have completed the whole back and chest. And this is a shot of all of the wastage that came out from fuzzing him up. So all of that I will be using next week to stuff my dinosaurs. So it's not as much as it could have been. And it's kind of cheerful. All right, so that's it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know that the instructions were a little more open this week, but I do feel like that leaves a lot of room for creativity. So as I mentioned, I have made both of these little cats and this little dog all using that exact same pattern. So there really is so many different variations you can do. A copy of this pattern will be given to my patrons, but I have no plans to release it in my store at this time. All right, like if you liked it, comment if you have something to say, subscribe, and I will see you next week for the dawn of the dinosaurs. Okay, bye.